USA Today has finally released their coaches poll after months of speculation. This is the first official poll that has been released for the 2024-25 college football season, with more to come as the AP poll gets set to be released next week. We'll have some early speculation as to who will be in the top 25 when the AP gives their official list next week. But for now, it's speculation for one more week. And we're going to be reacting to every top 25 team that is in the polls and where SEC counterparts are placed. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Lucas Hill here of SEC Unfiltered. Make sure you turn on the bell notifications and subscribe so that you are notified for every time we post a new video here on SEC Unfiltered. Also, check out the podcast version of the show over at secunfiltered.com. Leave a 5-star review if you love us, if a 1-star if you don't like us. Either or, we get your opinion and we get your feedback. Also, check us out on every social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, X, or TikTok. And today's video has been brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. Going over to the PrizePicks app on your Android or Apple device. Download it and use code SECU at initial sign-up to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 or more lineup. That's code SECU at sign up. $50 instantly. That $5 lineup is going to benefit you greatly. Remember to download the PrizePicks app on your Android or Apple device. Must be 21 years or older to use. Not available in all states. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-GAMBLER. USA Today has finally done it. They finally ended all the speculation from the media. And now it's time for reaction time as the first ever coaches poll has been released. Look at, there's the top 25. Here's where your SEC counterparts stand. Georgia at 1, Texas at 4, Bama at 5, Ole Miss at 6. Got Missouri and LSU coming in at 11 and 12. Tennessee at 15. Oklahoma surprisingly at 16. Yet Texas A&M at 20, rounding out the rest of the SEC. So in total, 8 SEC teams round out the top 25, all in the top 20. Texas A&M, let's start off with them. You bring back an offense that has arguably the best 1-2 duo in college football, led by Le'Veon Moss, who could be a breakout star in the SEC. Connor Weigman will be coming back from injury, and even when he wasn't injured, he was playing at a whole different level during his sophomore campaign. And this Texas A&M offense is legit. They have a lot of talent that surround them. They have an improving offensive line. And when you look at the defense, it starts with their defensive line, and especially that interior. I've harped on it for the last couple of videos and talked about guys like Nick Scourton, who led the Big Ten in sacks with 10 as a defensive tackle and had 50 tackles this past year. And I also mentioned about Shamar Stewart, who could also be a NFL draft pick next year if he is to break out this year. So I'm really excited to see where Mike Elko and his crew ends up in year one. I think 8 or 9 wins could be a win for this A&M squad, just depending on where they have been over the last 5 years with so many missed expectations and so many missed opportunities that they've been given. They got to start off hot, and they got to be consistent as the season goes on. And that's just been the trend that has really haunted them since after the Johnny Manziel era, dating back to the Kevin Sumlin era. And it happened to them last year whenever they lost a guy like Weigman, and a team that really could have had 10 wins last year. Now, obviously, you have to replace talent. You got to replace Evan Stewart in your backfield. You know, it's a tough task to do when you have a dynamic receiver like that go to an elite offense like Oregon. We'll get to them later on in the video, but really a lot of talent is going to be on this Texas A&M squad, and they could be a very underrated team to watch over in the SEC. Oklahoma at 16th. Honestly, I don't really know what to think yet about Oklahoma because you have such a young quarterback in the backfield in Jackson Arnold, who is yet to take a snap in regular season play against an SEC opponent. He played Arizona's defense last year, and didn't do terrible against them at all. Had his moments, had times where he was under a lot of duress, but he's going to have to step up his game in many big ways. He's going to have to be a difference maker as a young redshirt freshman. And there's going to be a lot of pressure for this Oklahoma team who comes into this one kind of with a lot of question marks, especially on the defensive side of the ball. How are they going to improve overall with a brand new defensive coordinator in their backfield with Zach Alley coming in as your new DC, coming in from a team like Jacksonville State that proved that they could compete in the FBS after, I think this is their first year, or last year was their first year in the CUSA, and had one of the best defenses in the CUSA. Shut out a lot of teams and held a lot of big time scoring offenses in check, and was very competitive down the stretch as well. He'll be a great young defensive coordinator for this Oklahoma squad. This is a team that last year, with Ted Roof as your DC, really didn't improve a whole lot. You know, you had moments at the beginning of the year whenever you were dominant, and then following the Texas game, your secondary really got torched. You gave up 29 to UCF and got in the hole early. You gave up 38 to Kansas, lost in Bedlam, and then got in a shootout with TCU, and then literally let Arizona's offense walk all over you after that season. So there's a lot of, I guess, pressure for Oklahoma this year, just knowing that they're what they've been. But we'll have to see what happens going into this year. You got a great interior with Dominic Williams in the middle. You got Caden Woolard, who may not start immediately, but will be a very capable interior guy. Maybe even put him on the outside as well. Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman are going to be the guys to watch out for on that defensive side of the ball in Oklahoma. Offensively, you shouldn't be too bad. Jackson Arnold, yeah, I know he's young, but he's got some great talent around him. You got Deion Burks, who had an electric season at Purdue, could be one of the best young receivers in the SEC. And Seth Luttrell has his stash of receivers that he can use at any time. You got Andrell Anthony, who will be back from injury this year, who is on his way to a breakout year. You got Nick Anderson, who will be a young guy and can make plays at any point in time. It's very clutch down the stretch in the year. And to add Deion Burks to that young receiving core, that is a recipe for what could be a very underrated Oklahoma squad that could make some noise in the SEC in year one. But they've got a tough schedule ahead of them. They got to go to Vaught Hemingway and play Ole Miss. You got to go to the Cotton Bowl and play Texas and Red River. You're going to Auburn. You get Tennessee at home, who you could beat, but that's going to be a defining game for both of those teams. Then you go to Missouri. You go to LSU. You play Bama. I mean, this is a tough stretch of games for Oklahoma to play. So we'll have to see what happens with them down the stretch. Now, speaking of very underrated teams in the SEC, Tennessee coming in at number 15. I really think Tennessee could jump LSU and Missouri. They could be a top 10 team, maybe even just outside at number 11. Do I like where they are at 15? Not really. I think they are better than Clemson and Utah. But again, the coaches poll. We'll see what happens when the AP releases their rankings next week, because these are always going to be subject to change. We'll just have to see what happens next year. So Tennessee may have gotten a first place vote. I don't think so, but we'll just have to see. No, they didn't get a first place vote. This is the teams that got a first place vote, by the way, in the coaches poll. Michigan, Texas, Ohio State with 7, and Georgia going to be number 1, and we'll get to them later. Just on the side note. Tennessee is going to have maybe the second or third best offensive line in college football, with Texas and LSU being the top two, obviously. Josh Heupel's offense is going to be awesome. You've got Dylan Sampson, who's a young running back who's going to be bound for a breakout year this year. Dual threat guy, can play like an Alvin Kamara, averaged 5 yards a carry last year to go along with 17 receptions for 175 as well. Got his first start in the Citrus Bowl and took advantage of it. 20 carries for 133 yards. Nico Iamaleava, I hope I said that right. I know you guys have been giving me crap in the comments for how I say his name. Iamaleava. There we go. But he's going to be arguably one of the best young freshmen in the SEC. Guy's got a lot of talent. Did well in the Citrus Bowl. I know his defense basically picked up most of the slack, and he had a great running back. Finished off with 3 touchdowns on the ground to go along with a passing touchdown, 3 total touchdowns, 12 of 19, 151, and a touchdown in the game against Iowa for his first ever start. This guy has a lot of talent. This guy's going to end up being one of the best freshmen in the game. And he's got an offensive line that is veteran bound, that despite all the transfers that have come through, with Lance Hurd, who could be an underrated freshman, who was an all-SEC freshman last year and did really well, and despite being behind guys like Emory Jones and Will Campbell at offensive tackle, who's going to be very good. You got Javonte Sprangins, who will also be very good. Cooper Mays is the unheralded leader of this defense. Early on, they're going to be tested against North Carolina State in the Mayo Classic, so we'll have to see what goes on there. Then you get 2 road tests against Oklahoma and Arkansas. 3-game stretch that'll really define their season is Florida, Bama, and Kentucky. And then they go to Georgia back on November 16th. So I can't wait to see what that game brings up. I do think that if they could potentially go 10-2 and have an opportunity to get into the playoff, but we'll just have to see how the rest of the SEC does, because this could be arguably one of the most crazy seasons that we've seen in college football. LSU coming in at 12. Now, this is coming from a Baton Rouge guy. I do think LSU should switch with Tennessee for sure. I don't think that they're better than Tennessee. I think Tennessee has a lot more promise to show than what LSU does. They've still got question marks on the defensive side of the ball, in the secondary and in the interior. Linebacking-wise, they shouldn't be bad. They do have a lot of guys that can fill in those roles. You got Greg Penn, who's going to be one of the most underrated players in the SEC. Whit Weeks should finally get some playing time. And, of course, with Harold Perkins moving on to that Will Backer position, it's going to be a lot of stress for this defense just getting adjusted to Blake Baker's first year. The over-under for their first game against USC, who comes in at 23rd, is 62.5. If I'm you, I'm probably going to go ahead and bet the under. I don't think both offenses are going to put up more than 20-30, but the winner of that game is probably going to get to 30 first. I do think the offense is going to take a bit of a step back, but not too much of one like they did in 2020. It's still going to be one of the best offensive lines in the nation. You're still going to see a great offense. You're not going to be like what you saw last year, but they still will finish out the NCAA season in the top 25 in total offense. You got Garrett Nussmeier, who's going to be a great young quarterback who has plenty of development to do with his passing game and his accuracy. But honestly, Tennessee is a much more veteran and based team than what LSU has. So I would at least switch them up and have Tennessee coming at 12 and LSU at 15. Just with where Tennessee is defensively as well, and secondary-wise, they're a bit more experienced as well. But overall, we'll see what Brian Kelly's crew has in store for them. They have a semi-favorable schedule They have Ole Miss at home. You do go to South Carolina at Williams-Brice. You could get upset there going to that environment. You got USC at in Vegas. There could be an upset there. We'll have to see what happens there. You go to Arkansas, could be an upset there. Go to Texas A&M, and then Bama at home, going to Florida, Vanderbilt, and then Oklahoma. Either or, I do think LSU is going to be better defensively. They can't get any worse. That's the biggest thing that's going on in Baton Rouge. So we'll just have to see where this LSU defense is, and then we'll make our evaluations as soon as the season gets started. Now, Ole Miss coming in at number 11 is interesting. They bring in a brand new defensive coordinator in Corey Batoon, who is at South Alabama, having to replace Blake Baker, who's at LSU. Now, this is going to be a fun little team. You have the two best quarterbacks and receivers in the SEC. And not only that, you have a 1-2 punch at running back that is awesome. Yes, you lose Cody Schrader, and this is so unbelievable that, yes, you can lose the best running back in the SEC last year. You can lose NFL caliber guys around the defense as well. And then all of a sudden, you guys just replace them with studs. You lost Darius Robinson, who's a first-round pick. Tyron Hopper's a third-rounder. You lost Jalen Carlos. You lost Ennis Rackestrout. Chris Abrams-Drain. You're going to miss really much in that secondary. But look at who you bring in. You bring in Toriano Pride from Clemson, who has a lot of opportunity. Didn't get as many stars, who's been under a great defense before Brent Venables left. You got Caden Green, who's an underrated offensive lineman from Oklahoma. You know, this is just a great overall team that Missouri is going to be bringing in. You bring back the Brady Cook and Luther Burden duo. They're unbelievably good. Kirby Moore could have himself a Broyles Award year this year and could bring himself into the head coaching ranks whenever the season ends. We'll just have to see where he ends up. I do think Kirby Moore could go. I think Glenn Schumann could go. I'll be posting a video about that pretty soon. But Missouri does have a lot of talent. You know, and there's quite a bit of hype around this team. You know, it's not just the skill guys. It's not just the receivers and your quarterback. You got a great 1-2 punch at running back with Marcus Carroll, who's coming off of a 1,000-yard year at Georgia State. And you bring in a guy like Nate Noel, who was unbelievable this last year with Appalachian State, ran for almost 1,000 yards, had 5 straight games where he ran for 100 yards or more, and then got injured as the season went on. Kind of limited his carries quite a bit. But, I mean, this dude is a dominant runner. 5'10", 190 pounds. And you bring 2 guys in that could be really good pass catchers out of the backfield. We'll just have to see how they're utilized with Kirby Moore's offense as the season goes on. Number 6, Ole Miss. Not surprisingly, they're a top 10 team. They utilize the transfer portal really well. I mean, they did an awesome job of utilizing it. Lane Kiffin is the ultimate troll in college football, and it's awesome to see where they are. Pete Golding is going to have a field day with guys like Walter Nolan, like Jaden Ivey, you know, and I'm really excited to see what they utilize with them. You got Princely Uman-Malin, who is arguably the best transfer defensive lineman in the portal other than Walter Nolan and Dominic Williams. Played at Florida, was an all-SEC type player, really strong guy, 6'5", 255, has an opportunity to be a first-round draft pick this year. Could have gone to the draft last year, but opted to stay for one more year, decided to head on over to Pete Golding's defense. And this is going to be a lot of fun to watch this team. I can't wait to see what these guys have in store. I think Jackson Dart's going to be a Heisman contender this year. He's going to do a lot of big things for this Ole Miss team. He's coming off of a 3,300-yard season, 23 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Really brought that interception rate down a lot. Didn't run a lot as well, although he did have 8 rushing touchdowns. He's going to be developed more as a pocket passer. I don't think you'll see him run as much because he's going to have a great offensive line with him. You got a great running back crew with Logan Diggs, with Henry Parrish. I mean, there's just so much talent around this team that it does kind of surprise me that they aren't a top 5 contender, that they aren't a top 5 team. But I mean, there's just so much talent around this team that is just hard to really consider them otherwise as a top 10 opponent. So we'll just have to see what they go on. Their secondary also is going to have a lot of great talent. You got Trey Amos in the backfield. You got Key Lawrence, Yam Banks, guys that are just all-around studs. They've been there for a while. They have a favorable schedule as well. So I do think the biggest question mark will have to be with Georgia, and you go to Ben Hill Griffin to play Florida. You go to LSU. Hopefully that won't be the track meet that we saw last year, but anything can happen in college football. I don't think it will be a track meet. It won't be a first to 50 like it was last year. It'll be more like another first to 30 game like LSU will have against USC up until they get the kinks worked out on their defense. Coming in at number 5, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Oh, man. This will be a heck of a year for Alabama. It's year 1 of the DeBoer era. I think they were picked to finish 2nd or 3rd in the SEC. They're picked to finish 3rd in the SEC. I do think that they have an opportunity to do a lot of great things. I do think that they're going to be a contender. I do think that they'll continue to be a great overall team. You have great All-American guys. You got Tyler Booker. You got Parker Brailsford. 2 guys that were just unbelievable. Brailsford's from the University of Washington. He's a big transfer that DeBoer brought from the Huskies, and Booker's been there for the last 2 or 3 years. Preseason first-team All-American last year, and he's going to be even better this year. He could be the next great offensive lineman to come from Alabama, follow in the steps of those who have come before him. Some other All-Americans that we could see, Jalen Milroe is going to be a Heisman contender. I know we've had a couple of conversations with him. The biggest thing, though, he's got to work on that passing accuracy. He's got to work on molding his game into where Lamar Jackson is. And I think he has the opportunity to do that as well. He had a great game in the SEC title against Georgia. Could have done a lot more against Michigan. Could have done a lot with more in the passing game. And I think that's what DeBoer is going to have him do. He's going to be so much more than just a running quarterback. He's going to be used more as a downhill threat, and he's got a lot of talent to do it. You know, there's guys that you would think is not that great. I mean, this is a lot of talent. You got Kendrick Law, who's coming off of a pretty decent year, has an opportunity to crack the starting lineup. You got Ryan Williams, who's going to be a young freshman, Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Alabama, big commit in the class of 24. You got Jeremy Bernard, comes from the DeBoer offense as well, got a lot of playing time. And when you bring him in with a quarterback like Milroe, who's got quite an arm, actually, he's going to be unbelievable. And then CJ Dupree, who didn't really play much last year, but he's going to fill into that starting role with Alabama. So we're going to see what happens with them. And then you got Kobe Prentice, who didn't play a lot, was a starter during his freshman year, but he's bound for a breakout year. I do think that he's going to get a lot more receptions. I think he's going to get a lot more opportunities down the stretch, and I think he's going to utilize that to his advantage. So we'll just have to see what happens with the offense. Defensively, you got to replace a lot of talent. Jaheim Otis could be the leader of this defense. He's been around there for a little while, lost 75 pounds prior to that true freshman year. You bring in a lot of young freshmen in the backfield. Damani Jackson's going to have to step in and take that leadership role, even though he's only been in the program since January. This is going to be a guy that has the most experience out of all of them, so we'll have to see where he lands off. Texas overall, I think everybody knows about them. Everybody knows about Quinn Ewers, who could be the second favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. You bring guys in from Alabama that you literally basically just stole from this team. I mean, it's awesome to see what Texas did, how they used the transfer portal to their advantage, and they really just took advantage of them. You get a guy like Isaiah Bond, who has excellent speed, who could be a great replacement for a guy like Xavier Worthy. And then when you add the backfield presence of CJ Baxter, who was the #1 back in the class of 23, who showed promise at the end of the year and really did well utilizing that to his advantage. I mean, that's a recipe for success. You do have a brand new co-defensive coordinator in Johnny Nansen from Arizona. That was a big get for if you're Texas. So Pete Kwiatkowski has a lot of big-time guys to his advantage. But the biggest problem for them could be the interior of that defense. They didn't really get the guys that they wanted, but they have a lot of trust in Alfred Collins. They have a lot of trust in Tyolai Savea from Arizona, who could be a big-time guy who followed Coach Nansen from Arizona. So he showed a lot of promise whenever he was there, was a Polynesian College Football Player of the Year watch list at the beginning of the year. And he's going to continue to show that over the course of the season. You're going to see him in a lot more. Him and Alfred Collins could be the best 1-2 interior, probably the most underrated that we've seen in a while. But it's hard to replace guys like Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. So we'll have to see. I do think Texas is still going to be in that college football playoff ranking. I do think that their schedule does favor them. However, they could be a hit and miss, could go 9-3 and could run the table. So Texas is going to be probably one of the most talented teams in the SEC, but we'll have to see what we see on the field. And the #1, nobody's surprised about this. I think Georgia's going to go for 3 out of 4 this year, and I think they do have everything in store for them to do that. I talked to Jordan D. Hill the other day about this Georgia team, and they say that despite the losses, despite all the offseason and crap that's been going on, transfers first have really been stepping up from Georgia. Their receiving core is still great, and Carson Beck has just had an excellent start to fall camp, so that there's no need to worry about what's going to happen to this team. Still a lot of great talent, not only with Dominic Lovett, you got London Humphreys, you got Carson Beck, you got Trevor Etienne. So the loss of Ra Thomas really doesn't affect guys like that. You got Colby Young, who could be a star in the making. So Mike Bobo's offense is going to be another fun one to watch. I think Etienne is going to be utilized a lot like how a guy by the name of Noshawn Marino would use whenever Bobo initially was with Georgia back in 2007. So defensively, it's still going to be the same old Georgia. Ellis Robinson could be the best young freshman in the SEC. You got Smail Mondon, who's going to be an excellent linebacker, along with Michael Williams, as well as Nazir Stackhouse. So overall, and of course, everybody remembers Malachi Starks, the All-American safety, who's just going to elevate his game even more and can potentially be a top 10 draft pick in the class of 2025. So there you go. That is the coaches poll of this year. Cannot wait for next year's coaches poll, or for next week's AP poll when it finally gets released. We finally get an inside look to where each team is at. You got the rundown, you got the rankings, and now it's time for more speculation. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about the initial coaches poll? Give me your thoughts, give me your opinions. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. Turn on the bell notifications for more from the best SEC entity on the internet. And for more from us here at SEC Unfiltered, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok at SEC Unfiltered. And check out SECUnfiltered.com for more from the best SEC entity on the internet. So, for Lucas Hill, see you on the other side.